please feel free to write them down and keep them up your sleeve, and we'll come on to those later on. So, digital marketing, however you look at it, is so much a part of today's life. It's very difficult to imagine the world without a mobile phone in your pocket or without the internet, where you can have access to any information at any time in any place. It's been a focus of mine for the last 10 years, but what I want to do is just sort of back up a little bit and share with you where I started my career and how I got to where I am today. So I'm going to do that to start with. I'm going to talk through what I would see as the 7 major challenges that all businesses face today embracing digital. And I'm going to end with just a few personal observations about what I think is really important in getting into the world of work, some of the things to really watch out for, and some of the things to avoid. So, my story, I've been working in digital marketing for the last 10 years, but for marketing more generally for 10 years prior to that. I started my career after a degree in politics in journalism. So I started out traveling around quite a bit. I'll show you a slide later of something rather frightening I saw in China. And so my careers involved travel early on, journalism, and then within marketing, I spent a number of years as a global marketing director for Clear Channel, which is an out-of-home media company. I realized then that 10 years ago, the future was certainly digital, and within that, mobile was the fastest growing and most dynamic part. So I shot straight into mobile as my first step into the digital world. And in the last 10 years, I've been tutoring, I've been lecturing, I've been writing books. I've written 2 best practice books on mobile, and I run my own consultancy practice, as Matthew said earlier. Here are some of the brands that I'm working with and have worked with. So you can see quite a broad range here. Retail and gambling, I would say, are at the forefront of innovation when it comes to using mobile. It's absolutely clear. Have we got any gamblers in the room? Is anyone going to tell me they gamble? So who do you gamble with?
Ladbrokes and Net360.
Right, Ladbrokes. I spent 6 months working with Ladbrokes in-house in order to make it easier for you to get out your phone and have a flutter on the horses or the football or poker or casino or whatever else. These guys are very good at making it easy for you to spend money, and that I'll come on to this later on as one of the key recommendations. User experience is fundamental in making it easy for your customers to engage and hopefully spend money. The other big area, retail. So I'm sure all of you will be using your phones as part of the purchase decision. So working with John Lewis, where I do a lot of training programs in-house, with Superdry, with a number of other retailers, it's fundamental that if they don't realize how mobile is being used to change the buying behaviors of their customers, customers will go elsewhere. Financial services, slightly slower out the blocks. I'm spending a lot of time at the moment working with HSBC in London, in Dubai, in Hong Kong, in Toronto, explaining to those guys how they should be considering bringing mobile in as the banks become seriously under threat now from these highly invested in fintech businesses, financial technology businesses, who make it very easy to engage with the bank, even if the bank may be closed at the time. So there's a big opportunity for growth there. And you can see some other sectors, travel, FMCG, all of which are using mobile to a greater or lesser degree very well. Yes, Kent?
What are the questions you're facing with American Express and HSBC? What kind of assignments do you get from them?
So let's take HSBC. So for HSBC, the biggest challenge there is understanding and connecting with the millennials. You know, millennials whose lifestyles are very, very different. They don't have the disposable income that their forebears have, but they need to start engaging in HSBC as their brand of preference early on in their career, as a saver, as a credit card user, as a lender for mortgage or whatever else, before then migrating them into corporate or business customers. So that's their main challenge. They're doing pretty pretty well with their wealth management clients because they're less likely to switch. With Amex, it's really about providing very effective partnership programs. So for retailers looking to partner with a financial services partner, that they've got a quick and easy way to do that. I'll show you an example for Barclays later to illustrate that point. So a broad range of sectors there. One of the most frightening things about digital, and mobile in particular, is the sheer pace of change. I'm just about to finish rewriting one of my books on mobile. It was first written 2 years ago, and what I thought would be a fairly straightforward rewrite, switch out some case studies, put some new case studies in, a few data changes, has ended up taking a lot longer than I expected, because whole sections of the book have since been superseded with new technologies and new ways of doing things. So there's a lot of change. It's also clear that if you're working in any form of marketing, what seemed to be the way that we thought the world would turn out is not likely to be the way it is today or the way it's going to be. Just think, for example, 90% of the world's data was produced in the last 18 months. The exponential growth in the creation and sharing of data is quite mind-boggling. Think about, for a business, how they get their heads around all this data, how they get their heads around all the new ways of capturing customer information and then building that into their business processes. And think, if you're at the other end of it and you're looking to stop the bad guys getting out there, quite how many cyber crimes there are. It's estimated by PwC 120 million cyber attacks every single day. What does that mean? They've got to be trying to stay one step ahead and investing in ever more sophisticated encryption technology so they don't allow their customer data to be hacked. Because all it takes is one bad record, slip, or one piece of information to go astray, and the reputation for that business is significantly under strain. Has anyone had their data hacked? Anything at all? What was your example?
I once by accident got a Trojan horse in my computer, so it wasn't enough the entire system data to like all the viruses and pretty much.
All the viruses. Okay, so you attacked from a viral. What was your example? Email address. And what, you were getting spams from all sorts of customers. Maybe you were being used to send spam mail. So the idea of being able to keep a secure customer database and give confidence to your customers that if there is an attack, you will quickly get it under control is causing a major headache for a number of businesses. And I would say the cyber, back to your earlier question, Ken, the reason that the banks have been somewhat slower to adopt mobile and digital technology is because as a priority, cyber attacks has taken a lot of resource and brain power away from what would otherwise be a very obvious thing for them to invest in, as the retailers and the gambling businesses have done. Now, it's clear that digital has a fundamental disruption effect on any single business, and I'm going to show you a number of examples in the rest of this session. Here is someone whose name is very familiar to me and people working in the mobile space. You've probably never heard of her. She's called Mary Meeker. She's a very well-respected and a very well-cited analyst on the West Coast who writes extensively around digital and digital transformation. And this quote, I think, says a lot to me. Some brands are going to win big, others are going to wonder what just happened. So if you imagine for a minute you're working in an industry and suddenly a business that you've never even heard of appears overnight and starts taking your customers away from them, you need to be aware of who that business is, what they're doing, and why is it that your customers are less loyal to you and more happy to switch. So just let's look at that for a second. Name an industry that's been fundamentally disrupted by digital. Any examples? Oh, the camera. Yeah, okay, so the photographic industry. Yeah, so suddenly along comes one of these, and suddenly everyone is a photographer, and everyone's able to take and share and, frankly, put the SLR market under severe strain or put it out of business altogether. I was doing some work with Kodak 2 years ago. Kodak in North America. Kodak had that whole industry completely nailed down. What happened? They simply didn't see the threat that Apple was creating under their noses, and as a result, their business is completely a shadow of what it was before. It's gone into Chapter 11 and it's had to re-emerge, but really is a shadow of where it was before. You could add to that other businesses, those in the business of, for example, creating alarm clocks. Who's got an alarm clock? Who uses an alarm clock in the morning anymore? Well, we use our phone, right? Paper diaries, maps, A to Z maps. The list goes on, and now we're seeing the payments industry itself under severe threat, as we're seeing Apple Pay, Samsung Pay, and the Google Wallet coming in and looking to threaten those markets. So fundamentally, businesses need to understand the significant threat that the mobile behavior shift is having on their customers and therefore on their whole business models. So one of the easiest way to test, in my view, the businesses that get this and those that don't, is to check out if they've got apps. And if they've got an app, what does their app do? So let's just have another little look. Who uses apps on a regular basis here? Okay, everyone, okay? So just tell me, what's your favorite app?
Mainly Facebook, because I have most of my information and news is on there.
Facebook, okay. Anyone else?
Probably LinkedIn.
LinkedIn? Okay, very studious. What else? Who else? Ken, what's your favorite app?
Channels, of course. I mean, I check the weather every day.
The weather, yeah, that's an obvious one. Anyone else?
Auctions.
Huh?
Auctions.
Auctions. Okay, now what do all those apps have in common? What have they all got in common?
They're replacing things that originally existed.
Replacing things that already existed, yeah? But I'll tell you another thing that they've all got in common. Every single one of you had a smile on your face when you told me what your favorite app was. Now that's quite important, because what that indicates is that these apps are making your lives easier. And a fundamental principle of anything to do with digital is that you are making people's lives easier, quicker, more efficient than what they were doing before. Now here's an example where that wasn't the case. Back in 2007, British Telecom, our former monopoly for telecoms, decided to launch an app to help you find your nearest phone box. Now when you think about that, that's an absolutely insane waste of money. Not only that, they decided to charge £3 to download the app. Clearly a major problem. The guy lost his job. Arguably he should never have had a job in the first place. But there is certainly a bit of a case where businesses feel obliged to start spending money in doing stuff, most notably building apps, because they feel that's the cool thing to do. However, the big mistake here is that the fundamentals of a business, providing services cost effectively, which your customers want to use, does not go away. The challenge is there are so many more channels and different ways to do just that, that for a lot of businesses, they lose sight of the basics and therefore end up making some big mistakes. I would argue that the priority today, more important than ever before, is to stop thinking about creating products and finding ways for your product to get to market, and instead think about your customer. Customer first. Now this seems blindingly obvious. You learnt this at school. But how many businesses would you say genuinely get this and genuinely put the customer at the heart of what they do? I'm going to talk a lot more about that. So it's somewhat of a rhetorical question. But it's clear that if your customer comes first, what you need to do is get detailed insights as to who your customer is, what devices they're using, where and when, and what they're using them for, and then provide ever curated and personalized content which they are going to find it easy to engage with, which is going to put smiles on their faces rather than frustrate them because they're getting stuff that's not relevant to them. One of the things that I'm doing at the moment is launching a Wi-Fi network in a place called Kibera on the outskirts of Nairobi. Now, Kibera is not the most affluent part of Africa, quite the opposite. What's fundamental to the people in Kibera is getting access to the internet as a way to get information to improve their education, therefore improve their prospects of getting a job and setting up an enterprise, and of course the whole world of health and medication. So what we needed to do there was to get a detailed understanding of what the people in Kibera needed, by running detailed focus groups, understanding what the product proposition would look like, how we were going to price it, how we were going to position it compared with the competition, and what infrastructure and hardware we were going to build. So that was getting detailed customer insights and running a series of focus groups. And what we discovered by doing the focus groups is that the needs of the people in Kibera were radically different from what we thought in the first instance in terms of the price point, how we should market this, and the important role of social media in doing a lot of this work for us. There are people out there who just seem to have an innate understanding of what their customers want without even needing to ask them. Now, I have to say, I owe this guy my life. As someone working in the mobile space, if it wasn't for what he created with his obsession on the product, on the detail, on the specification, there's no way I'd be doing what I am today. But I think this quote is really worth thinking hard about. Some people say, give customers what they want. His view is, don't give them what they want. Understand what they're going to need, anticipate that need, and make sure that that is the core part of your business proposition. Our task is to read things that are not yet on the page. And my God, this guy has succeeded. How many of you have got iPhones? How many iPhone users? How many of you have ever needed to look at a manual to understand what the iPhone does? It's so intuitive. I've got 3 children, aged 5 up to 14. They've all got Apple devices. They tell me stuff about what I don't know on these devices. I've got a mother the other side of 80 now. She's got an iPad. It's fundamentally transformed her life. She's now browsing on the iPad for stuff that she never did on a PC before. So the genius here was understanding what the customers were going to need and building that into a series of products that were in constant iteration to improve what could be done. This is regrettably a problem for a lot of businesses because customers have very high expectations about what they should be able to get from businesses engaging with them on their devices. Businesses are behind their customers when it comes to delivering that. What we all want as marketers is for our customers to feel when they buy our product. Now, when you last got your Apple product, or let's rephrase this, when you got your first Apple product, the chances are that you were super happy with what you'd got your hands on. Why? Because the product proposition that was marketed with great simplicity and elegance was matched all the way through the customer journey. You walk into an Apple shop and you talk to the genius behind the bar, there's very little that that person doesn't understand and has the ability to explain it in language that everyone can understand. So whether it's the product itself, the shops that you're in, the online experience, who's gone onto the website and tried to find information about an Apple thing they didn't understand before. I don't know if you've done it recently, but the beauty with which it's worded, the simplicity, the economy of words they use is absolutely mind-blowing. You try and write copy that clear, that everyone can understand with that few words, and you deserve a medal. It's very well done, and it's very simple and very clear. The whole process with which iTunes works, they've got 100 million iTunes subscribers now and credit cards for all of those people, which creates a fantastic business model with which they can, of course, sell way more than just iTunes soundtracks, and then the evolution of Apple Pay, which is fundamentally transforming the whole payments market. So the experience beginning to end is absolutely phenomenal. So what I want to do now is, with bearing in mind what Apple has done and some of the points I've made here, is to bring this into the 7 main challenges that I see that businesses face when getting to grips with digital, in particular mobile, and what distinguishes those that succeed from those that need to do better. The first one is personalization. The fact is that as customers, we never share our phones. When was the last time you gave your phone to someone? It just doesn't happen. What that means is that we've got a time and a location-based data trail, but we've also got a very good knowledge that the person who responded is the person, one named individual, who's not sharing that device with anyone else, which provides very interesting micro-targeting capabilities and possibilities. Given that we're not sharing our phones and we're very demanding, what we should be understanding as marketers is that these guys are quite hard to please. And we need to make sure we really understand what they want to know, and then we tell them what they're interested in, not what we want to tell them. Now think about all the different ways you can gather information about customers. All the browsing data, both on the internet and in-app. Their search behavior, if they're clicking on ads, if they're watching videos, if they're sharing stuff on social media. There's a vast amount of content and data that we can capture and then use in order to provide highly targeted campaigns, whether it's message-based, advertising-based, price proposition-based. And the businesses that are doing this well have a very clear understanding of what the customer needs, and they're taking that information and personalizing it. So the last time you went through an airport, I imagine you probably had a barcode on your phone because you didn't need to find a printer to print one off. But having this sort of service, and for a business like EasyJet competing in a very, very difficult market in terms of the price proposition being commoditized, has made a major difference to EasyJet being able to trade up and win significant share, and the value of their business grow significantly as well, because they're providing highly customer-focused services, and they're doing it more quickly and better than a number of their bigger carrier competitors. The retailers are very hot on digital and mobile in particular, and what I'm fascinated about with this brand, Very, which is part of Shop Direct, they have spent a significant amount of money totally re-engineering their business. And at the heart of that engineering process is an obsession about the customer, who the customer is, how old they are, what they like to spend money on, whether they're price sensitive, and as a result they've created over 1,200 separate landing pages. Being able to personalize the landing pages has a very significant effect on the performance of that site, and since launching these landing pages, they're finding that they've got a 4-fold increase in conversion because they have personalized that experience. Last year, their sales increased £20 million year on year simply by doing that. And I say simply by doing that. Of course, behind the scenes there's a lot of complexity, but the challenge there is to make that a personal experience so people feel it's for them, they feel they're going to come back again, and then more likely to share it with their colleagues as well. Number 2, user experience. It goes without saying that we don't have a keypad, and we don't have a mouse, and we don't have nearly as many pixels, which means that the user experience on the phone has to be absolutely paramount in all the thinking. The fastest growth within the whole digital world, I would argue, is in the development and the growth of user experience consultancies providing customer-focused, experience-based activities which are fundamentally different from just taking something off a website and bunging it on a smaller screen. I'm going to come back to the point about aligning stakeholders later, but it's clear that the user, understanding what the user wants and building that into your business is paramount. We need to think that an internet site is performing very differently these days than when it was first launched maybe 10 years ago. It's not just about driving a load of traffic. What we know through using Google Analytics is what people are doing on the site, where they come in, where they go out, how much time they're spending, whether they're sharing, whether they're watching videos in full. So what we've got to be doing is producing digital experiences and moving away from simply impressions to interactions, rich interactions which people feel excited about using, and then track that to help get more insights of our customers and then retarget them based on their previous browsing history. So how do you envisage that user journey? This is where the real genius comes in some of the user experience agencies. What they're doing is dismantling user journeys and then reconstructing them and using the feedback from their customers and from internal stakeholders and building them into wireframes, and then using those and testing those on customers using prototypes before then going into full production design and production, which significantly reduces the time it takes to create a great digital experience. And as it's tested on the customer before going live, it's then got a much higher chance of performing successfully, generating more time on site, and therefore fewer clicks and higher conversion. So the user journey is critical. Number 3 is technology, and this is using technology to do the right things. I'd argue a big reason why a lot of digital didn't really realize its potential early on is because the technology guys got let loose to sell their technology to the world and rather hope that everyone would start using it. Let me ask you, and I used to sell advertising on the underground before I got into moving into digital, how many people are likely to go up to this poster on the underground and go down and take a snap of that QR code? You'd probably be arrested for being some sort of weirdo. But the point is, putting that bit of technology in the wrong place is bound to have a disastrous effect. And there are so many other examples where technology has just been used in the wrong way. What I would argue with technology is that we should be thinking about providing rich engagement with people where the technology genuinely does something different. I just want to show you a video from Coca-Cola in India here.
The relationship between India and Pakistan is one that has seen a lot of lows.
It's stressful, it's tense. It seems it's not improving and it's getting worse.
It's only been 60 years that we have been apart. Before that, we were living harmoniously together.
I think all the strife would go away if you took away the Baghdad in the middle of the two countries.
It saddens me that we have this neighbor that we can't even go visit.
The act's perception was ingrained in the head that that's the bad guy. But when they actually meet them, they realize you're one just like me.
Mainly because there's no communication. They're near us, but we have no access to them. And it's sad, because together I think...
Sorry about that.
Is this one?
That's on, yeah, you're on.
So shall I put it from the beginning?
Yeah.
A lot of lows.
It's stressful, it's tense. It seems it's not improving and it's getting worse.
It's only been 60 years that we have been apart. Before that, we were living harmoniously together.
I think all the strife would go away if you took away the Baghdad in the middle of the two countries.
It saddens me that we have this neighbor that we can't even go visit.
The act's perception was ingrained in the head that that's the bad guy. But when they actually meet them, they realize you're one just like me.
Mainly because there's no communication. They're near us, but we have no access to them. And it's sad, because together I think we would do wonders.
exchange ideas, thoughts, gestures, and take away that communication gap that exists.
If I have any opportunity to go to India, I'll surely go there.
The whole idea of actually touching hands, it's like communicating with each other without words, and that action speaks louder than anything else.
This is what we're supposed to do, right? We're going to take minor steps so that we are going to solve bigger issues.
It is more about, how similar we are as opposed to how different we are.
Togetherness, humanity, this is what we want. More and more exchange.
So the technology is pretty straightforward when you think about it, but there's a great idea that sits behind that. And I think what's really interesting is for a brand like Coca-Cola, who now produces less than 50% of all the content out there about Coca-Cola, they've created some ideas, and they've created, by seeding an idea like that, a forum for customers to create their own version of Coca-Cola with huge social media sharing capabilities like that, so they can basically sit back and let their customers do their marketing for them, which is a pretty smart way of doing it, and obviously saves them a vast amount of money. So the fourth one I want to talk around is location. I think this is a massive growth opportunity. The real challenge here is to weigh up the balance between being able to target someone with highly relevant, time-sensitive information and getting their permission to do so. It's one thing to have a large number of followers in the digital world, you know, whether it's Facebook or on LinkedIn, but physically to have followers is a little bit creepy. So we need to be thinking very carefully about tracking people's location data and then using that in a responsible way and being very clear about what that value proposition looks like. The way we can do it is by creating SDKs, software development kits, inside apps, and then using all of that location information to target them with highly relevant offers at the right time in the right place. Think, for example, that you're moving house and you may have a particular product preference or product idea that you're interested in. We can see who you are, we can send you a relevant offer which you can then put into your passbook, and then we can send you a barcode which can be redeemed at the local point of sale. This is very powerful stuff if we have customers' permission in the first place. Ken, back to your example earlier for financial services. So if you want to differentiate from your competitors, how about having a location-based promotion which provides an added value service to your customers above and beyond what other customers get? Think, for example, that for Premier Rewards customers for Barclays, they can understand what their customers want and what they like. Are they interested in arts, movies, cinema, music, coffee, or whatever else? And with their permission, we can then send them location-based offers which they can then redeem at the point of sale. So this is a simple idea of using location data to provide value-added services to their customers as a result. Shared experiences is clearly a massive opportunity, given that so many of us now are rather skeptical about what brands are saying with their brand marketing, but entirely receptive to what other people have to say. Think about going on holiday or staying in a hotel without looking at TripAdvisor or ratings and reviews. So the opportunity now is to make sure that all of those social media networks are populated with content that you've created, and then you're allowing your customers to create their own version of that content and share it with their networks. Not only that, but for you to be tracking all of that share activity and using it to retarget customers based on their social profile. There are social listening tools which allow us to do sentiment tracking, and all of this provides a very rich insight into what our customers think of us. But make sure you're not just leaving it out there on the social networks. Work to bring it back into your site or onto your app so you can start to control that data and build those insights yourselves. There are many great examples. One of them is an app that's developed to help or remind people when their birthdays or their friends' birthdays are, or their relatives' birthdays are. Linked to Facebook, you get a notification, would you like to send your friend a card? If we know your friend lives on the other side of the planet, then we'll be sending that alert to you 2 weeks before, so you can send something in the post, and if it's someone around the corner, you don't need that long a lead time. But you can then very easily, and I've done this myself for one of my daughters, when I was on a plane going a long way away, I got this message, and sitting on the runway, I was able to design a card by taking a photo out of my contact book, putting a customized message in there, and then sending it off with a prepaid card. So these sorts of services which make it very quick and easy for your customer, and at the same time link in with the social media networks, are very, very successful, and there are many other examples just like that. In the interest of time, I won't show you this example, but if you're interested later, I can certainly replay this. So this is an example for a health club in Sweden. And the idea here is that they wanted to invite the members of the gym to get involved in their campaign, which involved a series of billboards. The billboards around Stockholm then became the subject of a lot of social media activity and sharing, and as a result, what started out as a very low-cost campaign within the realms of Stockholm became a global phenomenon, and within the app stores, this gym got to #1 in the App Store rankings, where it was nowhere to be seen before the campaign started. So again, the same principle of using social media to amplify the message and get notoriety at a very, very low cost, and of course get all the value of a social media comment on the back of it. Number 6 is to make sure that you realize there is everything to measure with digital, and there's every expectation that you're going to make a few mistakes in the process. The fact is that whatever the digital activity is you're doing, we can measure it. So if it's the sources for traffic coming into a site, for example, if it's the keywords that people are using before they land on your landing page, if it's the location, because we've got GPS tracking so we can see where people are browsing and when, we can look at demographics, landing pages, how much engagement flows through the site or through the app, the goals that we're looking for them to achieve on the site, conversion levels, value of customer, and critically exits. Are there some parts of the site where they're exiting? We can track all of that information and then use that to constantly update our hypothesis about how our customers are going to engage with us, and constantly look to iterate to a better experience for them, whether it's on site or in-app. The challenge internally is to make sure that everyone in the business understands what we're doing. And one of the biggest challenges is making sure that stakeholders who may not have an immediate responsibility for digital see that what we can do here, unlike traditional forms of marketing, is get very granular around what customers are really doing and very quickly fine-tune what we're doing to constantly improve conversion and optimization. So the stages here are the mechanical bits about having the right measurement tools to track what's going on, making sure that we've got metrics that people understand and improve our analytics capabilities. On the other side, it's really important that we as a business have processes which allow us to capture all this information and share it with people who understand it and can make quick decisions on the back of it. And you bring those two bits together, the analytics capability and the management processes, and that's what's going to differentiate the businesses that do really well in digital from those who are trying to make sense of it. And I'll give you an example. So do you bet with Paddy Power? You're not a Paddy Power fan. Any Paddy Power fans in the room? So Paddy Power's a very aggressive Irish gambling business. They've just merged with Betfair. I think you said you'd do some talk with Betfair. And what they had previously was an analytics team sitting in the data room being asked by all the product owners, can you do a run on this? I want to know how many people are downloading this app. I want specific breakdowns on these different demographics as to what they think about our products and where we can make changes to improve each and every one of those customer experiences. The guy in the analytics room had a nervous breakdown and had to leave. What they hadn't done was created a systematic approach. By the way, I hope you're not going to send this to Paddy Power. What they needed was a systematic approach to capturing all this information and a more informed way of disseminating that information across all the different product owners, the different marketing teams, senior management, so they could see at a higher level how all this fitted together and how they could allocate resources to the right teams in the right ways to maximize revenue for the whole business, rather than bow down to the one who shouted loudest when they turned up at the analyst's door. So there's a big structural issue and a big cultural issue that businesses need to address, rather than see this in a piecemeal way. Which leads me into the last one of my points, which is around stakeholder alignment. What I showed you and what I just described there for Paddy Power is common for so many businesses. If you're the guy who's in the digital team responsible for making this digital stuff happen, it's a pretty lonely place to be. Where you want to be is the hub in the center of a wheel where all the spokes lead to other stakeholders who understand what you're doing and understand how they could contribute to make your job easier. Now, I think for any business, having the chief exec on your side and the board sign off this digital strategy and support you is kind of important. Having salespeople out there who see you as a channel that can help them drive more sales and increase their performance, rather than another P&L that's going to take money away from them, as was the case with Marks & Spencer, who I was working with when they went through this transformation, is a major advantage. And then you can work your way around that wheel. I don't need to call each one out, and see that with the support of these stakeholders, you're more likely to succeed. But the challenge is, for most of them still, this digital thing is still a bit of a dark art, particularly if they're working in businesses with legacy databases and processes which don't exactly encourage innovation or market leadership in this area. As it happens with Marks & Spencer's, what happened was the chief exec took the digital team aside and said, you're going to have problems pushing this through because they're all going to resist you. They're going to see you as a threat. But don't you worry about that. That's my problem. If you get pushed back, come and tell me, and I'll knock some heads together. And that's what he did. And as a result, the team in the center were very, very efficient in being able to get buy-in from these other stakeholders and realize the digital vision, which put them ahead of their competitors when this exercise was first done. There are so many different ways to do digital and so many different interpretations of what it could be, that actually the language and the lost in translation is a major problem for a lot of businesses. Now just think, and this is a little cartoon I rather like, but I realize at the back you can't read it. So this, if I can read the words, this is how the customer explained it. Maybe there's a focus group here. And then over here, this is what the customer really needed. The customer didn't know what they wanted, back to what Steve Jobs was saying earlier. But think about how many ways that this vision can be misinterpreted by the project leader, who just clearly doesn't get what the hell this is about. That's never going to work. The analyst, the programmer, the beta testers, and then I like this one, the customer, how it was billed, some extraordinary thing, how it was supported, zero support, and then what the marketing advertised. So we need to make sure that whatever this digital vision is, there's strong leadership that explains it, stakeholders understand it, and the business fuses together to enable this digital transformation in any form. That could be for designing a site, but imagine all the other parts of the business that are impacted by digital. So much of it is about co-creation. This is a focus group, a workshop to define what a website looks like, with different parts of the site and different navigation and different landing pages, with the client, with the developers, with the designers, all in the same room around the table, and a bunch of post-it notes. My God, Post-it have done well out of this digital innovation. You see Post-it notes all over the place, and what an easy way to map out these journeys. And then when it comes to knowledge development, this is a bunch of guys from HSBC in Mexico, getting them round the table, people from different departments around the organization, and having them work out their own problems collectively round a table triggered by a specific business need is much more likely to build innovation and development in digital and break down the existing silos that so many of them go through. So that's the presentation bit done. I just wanted to end with just a couple of tips from me about how I think you should go about getting into digital if this is an area of interest, and a little bit about my story. My dad was a fighter pilot. He trained with the Royal Air Force. He was flying these things called Vampires. He never actually engaged, but he trained, and he knew from the day he was born that that's all he wanted to do. He then went on to design the radar on Concorde, very techie guy. I left university not really knowing what I wanted to do. I studied politics. I'd done my finals papers when this was going on in Tiananmen Square. I went straight to Beijing when I graduated because I wanted to be a journalist to interview the students who were involved in this stuff. My career took a rather unpredicted route. But what I'd say to you is, when you get into your career, it's important to realize that there are some basic principles, whether it was back then or today, that you should bear in mind. Make sure, as I would always make sure doing what I do, that you don't try and blag it. If there are things you don't know, admit it, but be very clear, if you're going to make statements, that you're absolutely clear about your territory, and don't pretend that you can do stuff if you can't, because it'll be sniffed out in the interview. Worse still, you get offered the job, you get found wanting, and you're out in your ear, which isn't good for anyone. Number two, so much of this is about self-belief. Now, I could be anyone standing in front of you and tell you the same message. What you feel about yourself and your capabilities will be projected to other people. It's always worth thinking big and believing you can do everything, but on the other side, being very honest about your shortcomings, and don't get complacent and think that what you know is the knowledge which is going to see you through. Things change so fast, you need to be prepared to accept there are things you don't know and be honest enough to admit them. Make sure that you stay ahead. Now, there's a big challenge in this industry, and it was really brought out rewriting this book. Things move so fast. So it's worth always thinking about learning the skills and looking at the source material for the latest intelligence, and save yourself a lot of time doing that, rather than trying to look at every blog and every site, because that's just going to do your head in. So think of the best ways. If you want to ask me, I've got some tips on that at the end. Make sure that you don't get stuck in the reeds and that you see the big picture. Your example of Nikon was a good one. There are so many businesses that have simply lost sight of the big agenda. There are businesses that don't even exist now, which in 10 years' time will be bigger than Amazon and bigger than Google. And they'll be built by someone in his garage in Seattle as we're speaking. So always understand what the big picture looks like and get ready for that, rather than get set in your ways and set on a journey which is necessarily going to have to change a lot. I would never be thinking more than 3 years ahead in this business, because there are so many unpredictable issues ahead of us. Make sure, if you're in an interview or if you're in the business, that you don't overpromise and underdeliver. That's a sure way of letting someone down, and if that someone happens to be your boss, you're really on the collision path to not getting that promotion. So make sure, always overdeliver and underpromise rather than the other way around. Sorry, girls, if you find that offensive. I did check with Matthew first. And the final thing, never stop learning. It's very interesting to see that the population is aging very, very quickly. I feel like a dinosaur with a lot of the stuff I do. By 2020, 50% of the population in this country will be over 50 years old. Now, those old people are not worth just dropping on the scrap heap and forgetting about. They have a lot of the world and business intelligence, which is actually pretty valuable to startups. They are the smart ones. Let's think about who invented the internet. Tim Berners-Lee. Think about Steve Jobs if he was still around. Think about a number of other very, very key pioneers in the digital world. They're now over 50. The over 50s have 90% disposable income, so they are an audience worth listening to. They're also learning themselves, and I'd advise you through your whole life to keep learning and keep asking questions. And with that, I'm going to throw it open and see if you've got any questions. I'm sorry that's overrun somewhat in our technical glitch earlier, but has anyone got any questions they'd like to ask me before the beer beckons? Any starters? Yes.
Now, it wasn't on your slide up there, but as far as I could see in the material we were given, you've also had Richmond as a client.
Richemont, yeah?
Sorry,
yeah.
But they deal largely with luxury.
Yeah.
So how do you see the considerations for them moving into digital rather than for someone like John Lewis, for example? Because luxury is largely about feeling, service, charm, rather than easier, quicker, and more efficient.
Yeah, so for a lot of the luxury brands, I'd say the number one thing is the quality of the display itself has to be 10 out of 10. You know, the amount of money they're spending on their retail premises, on their boutiques, their advertising in magazines, their advertising in other forms is absolutely first rate. So you need to make sure that the design and the execution is top notch. We need to make sure also that the customer buying his wife a diamond ring or a necklace or whatever else may not make an impulse purchase right there. It's a considered purchase. It's also a purchase which will involve the comments and the feedback of other people. So providing a digital experience which the customer can then be browsing and looking at the coffee table, at the restaurant, in the bar, wherever else, before going into the store, the experience before they get there needs to match up with the experience in the boutique itself. So the trick, I would say, is to make sure that we understand what content exists already and then repurpose that content to look fantastic on whatever device and make it easy also for them to share with other people to get their opinions. Okay? Yes?
I know that there is not one specific answer and varies a lot between companies, but as far as I understand how digital marketing works, a lot of companies fail because they don't know what to do since this is so new.
Yeah.
What do you think would be some fail-proof ways to tackle or enter the digital world that would avoid the fate that these companies are sharing?
I think the most important thing is to have your customer very close to you when you're making those big decisions. Now, it's very clear that the BT app, it was a bit of a joke that, but the important thing was there was absolutely no way that was providing a customer service which would be valued by any customer, not least if you expect them to spend £3 to download the app. The other example I gave you for Clever Card, the Clever Cards example, the reason that business does well is they constantly have a group of customers in their offices. They're feeding them tea and cake and stuff and running constant focus groups. And what they're saying is, hey, I don't know what that means on that site. Why are you using a word like that? Why don't you use another word? Or asking them, how much money would you spend on a card for your mother? Well, actually 4 times more than the amount of money you'd spend on the card for your daughter. So there's some big differences there, but it's the insights of the customer. Now, if you've got the insights of the customer and you can make sure that that feeds into the product development process and then the marketing, then you're much more likely to succeed, which mitigates the risk of spending money on stuff that doesn't work. In the UX business, creating prototypes on phones and showing it to customers for one part of the customer journey and making sure that that tests positively is certainly going to avoid the risk of spending a lot of money building something which your customers may not want at all. So the customer, and of course using all the data to validate what you're doing and monitoring that in real time.
But that's quite different to how Steve Jobs approached it, because in that quote that you showed, he said that he doesn't rely on market research. It's what he believes or what he knows or he knew that the customer wanted.
I'd ask you, how do you think Steve Jobs was able to do that, and how many other businesses are able to innovate in that way without apparently doing focus groups? Now, I'll bet that Apple has, does anyone know anyone who works at Apple? Yeah. How do you think they know so much about the product before their customer knows they need it?
Well, for one thing, it's my stepbrother, but he is a customer. He loves Apple. He is an ambassador for Apple.
Yeah.
So it's easy to find those type of targets when you are in it, when most of their employees are within their target market when creating it.
So they're living the brand already. So the feedback from a group who you can use as a self-selected group who are going to come up with the ideas for the next best thing, that's certainly one way to do it. I don't know how it is that Apple has created a product without visibly doing market research I don't know how they've managed to do it, but I would say it's the exception. I really don't see too many brands who aren't actively asking. And you think about it, you buy a product from most other brands, you'll probably get an email or a follow-up call after you made the purchase asking what you thought about the customer service. That's the sort of real-time tracking and getting that feedback and building it into an engine, which then feeds into the list of projects for the user experience people to tackle, the business analyst to see where the pain points are. That's usually the way it works. But certainly having your employees who live and breathe and keep their ears and eyes open, and also running very active blogs and tracking what the bloggers are saying and what the social media stuff's saying is a very good way to get sentiment without having to spend a bean on doing the research yourself. It's a very good question. I'm sorry I don't have an exact answer for you, but that's how I would answer it. Any more? Any more? Kent, you're sitting there.
Well, I don't know. I mean, it would be interesting to hear your take on which industry or which sector is, have, I don't know, disrupting, where digital marketing would have a disrupting effect in the future. I mean, the healthcare sector is very interesting to follow at the moment.
Yeah.
Is there any other industry that you see that will have that will be a big impact?
I think the ones where where the whole of the business can be served from a device with all of the benefits of location, of personalization, of sharing. Uber and Airbnb are the obvious ones, aren't they? These are two 7-year-old businesses. They've come out of very modest roots, and what they've created is not buying a load of hotels, it's not owning a whole load of taxis, it's all delivered through a very smart business where the app serves as both a B2C product, but interestingly B2B as well. How do you think all the taxi drivers on Uber get paid? All of those journeys are tracked through the app itself. They also talk to each other to understand where the traffic jams are to help one another get from A to B more quickly. Worryingly, Uber apparently has just bought 250,000 Mercedes. Why? Because they're apparently going to be launching driver-free Uber cars. Well, if you're an Uber driver, maybe that's not such great news. You look on the other one, you look at Airbnb. Airbnb is now selling hotel rooms. They're now selling distressed inventory that the hotel companies can't sell. Not surprisingly, because Uber's taken all their customers away. So there are some interesting models there. On healthcare, really interesting, but highly regulated. So there are some big issues around privacy there, but there's a ton of cash. It'd be very interesting for your Johnson & Johnson guy to see what he has to say about his digital plans. I've seen a lot of innovation within GSK and Bayer, which are two businesses I've worked with, but that's certainly one to watch.
My question is a lot like the first one that he asked. You had listed PwC on the list of companies you've worked with, but unlike the rest, they're more B2B rather than B2C. So what kind of work exactly did you do?
So that's working with their consultants to help their consultants and customer-facing teams get a better understanding of what digital is and then feed that into the advice that they're giving to their customers. Now, I have to say that some of the best questions I've ever had in training programs come from them, because they have a very good understanding of the business problems, and their questions are all around how to apply this stuff to business processes, which is where the real disruption comes. And as I've tried to explain in this session here, where the big difference is between the adopters who fuse it into the whole decision-making process with all the implications on data and decision-making, which differentiate them from the other B2C customers. But frankly, any business, B2C or B2B, is being disrupted. It's just a matter of scale according to the role that this is now playing in the customer journey. B2C tends to be ahead of the game.